Hi, my name is Dragomir, and I'm here at the Toast Collective. That's right at Kingsway and Fraser, in Vancouver, on the unceded ancestral and traditional territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples as an uninvited guest. And I hear land acknowledgements happening all the time, and I think that they're valuable to a certain degree, and I guess maybe have a desire for it to be more than just words, and so I'm gonna just like give it a little moment to just be. So I am surrounded by a show that I was very lucky to be accepted in to the Capture Photography Festival with. It's called Against Working, and the sort of proposition of the show overall is thinking about productivity and non-productivity, and thinking about sort of like different types of work, and how different types of work sort of operate in the world and trade in the world in terms of value, and also thinking about like the dimensions of who does what kind of work, thinking about like socially reproductive labor versus creative labor, thinking about like the classed and gendered and raced dimensions of labor, and I guess really understanding that when I make art and put out a work into the world, what I'm hoping to do is to make a proposition, to make an argument for something, to potentially imagine a different world, or to imagine this world in a different way, or to sort of think through what the world according to the work might look like. Behind me right now is the first piece in the show, sort of chronologically, called Strike. That's a projection of 3,000 matches that have been hot glued together, forming the word strike, and being set on fire with my hand, which you can see. I'm wearing the same sweater as I was at the time, and it was a new way of working for me. Previous to starting to make video, I was doing a lot of like giant sculptural stuff, pouring concrete, doing really laborious, sort of like minute, minuscule things. And during the research for this work, I started reading a lot more and making a lot less, and was thinking about and reading about the work of Clairefontaine, who's like a French collective that's made up of two artists who are Clairefontaine's assistants, sort of in the conception of the work of Clairefontaine. They operate as a collective in sort of the logic of making fun of the collective and making fun of, like in a gentle, loving way, but also in a way that's a bit harder, making fun of the limitations and the possibilities of collective action and direct action in the context of the art world, and how, to a certain degree, it's a bit futile. And they have some really interesting ideas about the human strike, in French, la grève humaine, where everyone just goes on strike, like there's a massive general walkout of people. And so I was just thinking about that and thinking about my own sort of experiences of like futility and frustration in in the collective organizing that I've been part of and in the social justice movements that I've been part of, like at the time that this work was happening, I felt super annoyed and like I felt like this like cycle of failure of like doing so much work and putting so much energy and hot gluing 3,000 matches, all for it to just burn and fall over, only to do it again, all for it to just burn and fall over, only to do it again, and nothing really sort of concrete coming out of people's organizing and struggles. And this is the first video work that I sort of ever made, and it marked like a really big course change for me in terms of what my practice looks like. I stopped making things in concrete. I stopped like laboring for nothing, like sort of like pushing the rock up the hill, like Sisyphus style, only to have it just like crush me on the way down again, only to like get up and do it again the next morning. And I think part of the work of this show for me is really coming to terms with my own sort of like extreme productivist impulses. I'm a child of immigrants. I am an immigrant as well. My family moved here in the early 90s, and my mom is a physician, my dad's a mechanical engineer, and they were extreme in their work ethic because they had to be in order to survive as like racialized immigrants in Canada, but also like passed that spirit in an unquestioning way down to me. And I think that there's something really powerful about this show, like serendipitously happening at this time, because a lot of people are thinking through some of the same questions of like why we work the way we do, like why bother to like put your blood and sweat and tears into a system that like essentially wants nothing more than to exploit you, and really like rethinking what the possibilities are for doing nothing, for refusing to be productive, and for refusing to work like both physically and literally, but also like in a spiritual way, in an intellectual way, sort of in an ideological way, right? Like what would it mean to go to work and just be like, you know what, I actually don't care at all, and I'm gonna do the literal bare minimum that it takes. And that's it. As I was doing research for some of this work, I came across a really like short, thin, really like brain-bending book by a guy named Jonathan Crary called 24/7 Late Capitalism and the Ends of Sleep. And in it, I'm going to paraphrase, he sort of makes an argument that we have sort of evolved in terms of like the cycles of capitalism to be in a time where things are available all the time and on all the time, and we're expected to be making things and producing things and or consuming things like basically all the time, and that there isn't really a place where like there's a refuge except for sleep. So sleep, he posits, is sort of the final frontier, where there is no way to be able to produce or consume anything, that capitalism attempts to basically just like eat away at sleep from all ends that it can, and that like dead time or non-productive time in our world and our lives is such a small increment of the day, and for some people just doesn't exist at all, right? Like there is no more time where you're just like staring at the wall thinking. Very few people have a chance to like read as a practice, because they don't have time, because they're hustling as hard as they can, and that's by design, it's not an accident. And his book started me thinking about like the managerialization of sleep. Underneath it is the desire to help us sleep better so that we can work better, so that we can be more effective workers and more efficient at producing things so that we can be more clear thinking and quicker on the draw. And it's not really about actually having like a good sleep, and it's not really about resting. And so I made these 3 wax candles. So they're made of beeswax and they smell really nice when you get up close. But the wick that runs through all of them is recycled fiber optic cable. And I was thinking about the aphorism, burning the candle at both ends, and thinking about like sleeping and rest, and also thinking about the idea that the malady and the remedy exist in the same object. What ends up in our system being presented as sort of the cure is bath bombs and scented candles and like little pouches of lavender that you can buy at Lush, and all of these other things that are like really not addressing the like deeper sort of issues and not asking any questions. I think that part of what I am thinking about is like productivity sort of in the macrocosmic sense, and then specifically productivity in the art world. This performance starts at home with me sweeping the floor on a daily basis, and then collecting sort of the detritus from the pan, and then freezing those contents into these tiny little silicone ice molds. The action of pushing these melting, rolling, sort of unpredictable balls across the floor is meant as a parody of a kind of like a really highly valued and also very masculine way of making art, which I guess could be kind of called the genius at work. The fact that I'm using a broom that doesn't have any bristles and effectively is just a stick is also sort of pointing to some of those like tropes of masculinity, like who has the biggest stick. But also the stick is a broomstick, and the broom is not a symbol of masculinity at all, and is more, to my mind, a tool that we use to sort of push back against entropy. Eventually, the little balls end up melting, and the dirt that was collected at the beginning of the process ends up being sort of redeposited on the floor. And I was thinking a lot about Meryl Lederman-Ukele's work and her writings on the maintenance manifesto and maintenance art in the 70s. but also thinking about the very raced dimensions of cleaning labor. At the end of the performance, the same action that sort of started the whole thing off ends up closing it out. So Karl Marx's beauty routine is on my right, and then on my left is Karl Marx's anti-capitalist ASMR. And in this video, I thought that it would be kind of cheeky to pretend that my hand is a hill and that like a tiny little like clay pellet that a friend gave me as a rock, and that I'm pushing the rock up the hill like Sisyphus, only to have it fall down, and doing that repeatedly. So the sound that you hear is the sound of these actions happening, but then also over top of it is me reading from a book called How to Do Nothing, and it's a small excerpt from that book. Like the theme of the book is sort of in the realm of what we've already been talking about in terms of like doing nothing and work refusal and thinking about like resistance versus refusal and what the political differences are between those things. And ASMR videos are a very weird niche genre on YouTube. I've been having trouble sleeping and having trouble getting to sleep specifically, and I because of the like algorithm that's determined by surveillance capitalism on YouTube, for me, showed me an ASMR video one time. I was like, oh, I'll try and watch it, and I've been like hooked on them pretty well ever since. And it's an interesting conundrum because they make a lot of money, like ASMR artists, as they're called, can potentially make a lot of money from their videos through sponsorships and advertising. But the point of them, like, they're predicated on basically getting people to sleep and getting people to relax. And I guess I found that kind of funny, like the irony of that. This character, Carla Mark, in one video she is applying makeup and like doing a makeup style like beauty routine video that are also like very popular and very lucrative on Instagram, but she's doing it on the face of a 2009 Nokia cell phone, and just like smearing like mascara and smearing eyeliner and like, you know, like cleansing and moisturizing and applying foundation, like all of the steps, and just using a lot of product to sort of like put a face on this phone, and like most of it is a bit of a joke, right? Like the whole, I don't know, it's difficult to articulate because it's a joke and it's also really serious, like dead serious at the same time, if we're really thinking about like the possibility of not working and all of the implications that come with that. So like thinking about things like universal basic income and like the end of the sort of capitalist world that we know, the end of corporations, the end of like this like extreme like productivist ethos are really serious, to me at least, and also funny. Like the work in this show, a lot of it is meant as a joke, the idiom "laugh so you don't cry" is like really kind of what's under this show, like very much so. And that's like a part of a cultural thing, and also part of like my like political orientation too. Like "laugh so you don't cry" is like a pretty solid way to get through life, and a lot of this work is laugh so you don't cry kind of work.
When we first moved to Canada, my mom worked as a residential cleaner while she repeated her entire medical degree. At the time, many foreign trained physicians couldn't practice without essentially doing their degrees over. And for the most part, along with some truck driving work, cleaning has been how I've sustained myself throughout my post-secondary schooling. In this performance, I'm using a mixture of pulverized charcoal and linseed oil and scrubbing with a brush that's been handmade out of glycerin soap to scrub this toilet.
"Bartleby," said I, "Ginger Nut is away. Just step round to the post office, won't you?" It was but a 3 minutes walk. "And see if there is anything for me." "I would prefer not to." "You will not." "I prefer not." I staggered to my desk and sat there in a deep study. My blind and veracity returned. Was there any other thing in which I could procure myself to be ignominiously repulsed by this lean, penniless Wright, my hired clerk? What added thing is there, perfectly reasonable, that he will be sure to refuse to do? "Bartleby." No answer. "Bartleby," in a louder tone. No answer. "Bartleby," I roared. Like a very ghost, agreeably to the laws of magical invocation, at the third summons, he appeared at the hermitage. Go to the next room and tell Nippers to come to me." "I prefer not to," he respectfully and slowly said, and mildly disappeared. "Very good, Bartleby," said I, in a quiet, sort of serenely severe, self-possessed tone, intimating the unalterable purpose of some terrible retribution very close at hand. At the moment, I half intended something of the kind, but upon the whole, it was drawing towards my dinner hour, and I thought it best to put on my hat and walk home for the day, suffering much from perplexity and distress of mind. Shall I acknowledge it? The conclusion of this whole business was that it soon became a fixed fact of my chambers that a pale young scrivener by the name of Bartleby had a desk there, that he copied for me at the usual rate of 4 cents a folio, 100 words, but that he was permanently exempt from examining the work done by him, that duty being transferred to Turkey and Nippers, out of compliment doubtless to their superior acuteness. Moreover, said Bartleby was never on any account to be dispatched on the most trivial errand of any sort, and that even if entreated to take upon him such a matter, it was generally understood that he would prefer not to. In other words, that he would refuse point blank. As days passed on, I became considerably reconciled to Bartleby. His steadiness, his freedom from all dissipation, his incessant industry, except when he chose to throw himself into a standing reverie behind his screen, his great stillness, his unalterableness of demeanor under all circumstances, made him a valuable acquisition. One prime thing was this: he was always there. First in the morning, continually throughout the day, and always the last at night. I had a singular confidence in his honesty. I felt my most precious papers perfectly safe in his hands. Sometimes, to be sure, I could not, for the very soul of me, avoid falling into sudden spasmodic passions with him, for it was exceedingly difficult to bear in mind all the time those strange peculiarities, privileges, and unheard of exemptions forming the tacit stipulations on Bartleby's part under which he remained in my office. Now and then, in the eagerness of dispatching some pressing business, I would inadvertently summon Bartleby in a short, rapid tone to put his finger, say, on the incipient tie of a bit of red tape with which I was about compressing some papers. Of course, from behind the screen, the usual answer, "I would prefer not to," was sure to come, and then how could a human creature with the common infirmities of our nature refrain from bitterly exclaiming upon such perverseness, such unreasonableness? However, every added repulse of this sort which I received only tended to lessen the probability of my repeating the inadvertence. Here it must be said that according to the custom of most legal gentlemen occupying chambers in densely populated law buildings, there were several keys to my door. One was kept by a woman residing in the attic, which person weekly scrubbed and daily swept and dusted my apartments. Another was kept by Turkey, for convenience sake. The third I sometimes carried in my own pocket. The fourth I knew not who had. Now one Sunday morning, I happened to go to Trinity Church to hear a celebrated preacher, and finding myself rather early on the ground, I thought I would walk around to my chambers for a while. Luckily, I had my key with me, but upon applying it to the lock, I found it resisted by something inserted from the inside. Quite surprised, I called out, when to my consternation, a key was turned from within, and thrusting his lean visage at me, and holding the door ajar, the apparition of Bartleby appeared, in his shirt sleeves, and otherwise in a strangely tattered dishabille, saying quietly that he was sorry, but he was deeply engaged just then, and preferred not admitting me at present. In a brief word or two, he moreover added that perhaps I had better walk around the block 2 or 3 times, and by that time he would probably have concluded his affairs. Now, the utterly unsurmised appearance of Bartleby, tenanting my law chambers of a Sunday morning, with his cadaverously gentlemanly nonchalance, yet with a firm and self-possessed, had such a strange effect on me that incontinently I slunk away from my own door, and did as desired. But not without sundry twinges of impotent rebellion against the mild effrontery of this unaccountable scrivener. Indeed, it was his wonderful mildness chiefly, which not only disarmed me, but unmanned me, as it were, for I consider that one, for a time, is a sort of unmanned when he tranquilly permits his hired clerk to dictate to him, and order him away from his own premises. Furthermore, I was full of uneasiness as to what Bartleby could possibly be doing in my office, in his shirt sleeves, and in an otherwise dismantled condition of a Sunday morning. Was anything amiss going on? Nay, that was out of the question. It was not to be thought of for a moment that Bartleby was an immoral person. But what could he be doing there? Copying? Nay, again. Whatever might be his eccentricities, Bartleby was an eminently decorous person. He would be the last man to sit down to his desk in any state approaching to nudity. Besides, it was Sunday, and there was something about Bartleby that forbade the supposition that he would, by any secular occupation, violate the proprieties of that day. Nevertheless, my mind was not pacified, and full of a restless curiosity, at last I returned to the door. Without hindrance, I inserted my key, opened it, and entered. Bartleby was not to be seen. I looked around anxiously, peeped behind his screen, but it was very plain that he was gone. Upon more closely examining the place, I surmised that for an indefinite amount of time, Bartleby must have ate, dressed, and slept in my office, and that too without plate, mirror, or bed. The cushioned seat of a rickety old sofa in one corner bore the faint impress of a lean, reclining form. Rolled away under his desk, I found a blanket. Under the empty grate, a blacking box and brush. On a chair, a tin basin with soap and a ragged towel. In a newspaper, a few crumbs of ginger nuts and a small morsel of cheese. Yes, thought I, it is evident enough that Bartleby has been making his home here, keeping Bachelor's Hall all by himself. Immediately then, the thought came sweeping across me. What miserable friendlessness and loneliness are here revealed. His poverty is great, but his solitude, how horrible. Think of it. Of a Sunday, Wall Street is deserted as Petra, and every night of every day it is an emptiness. This building too, which of weekdays hums with industry and life, at nightfall echoes with sheer vacancy, and all through Sunday is forlorn.